Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Barkeys, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop, let's start again. Well, today we're not with our buddy Billy Regan. He's enjoying a little R&R down in the coast of Georgia. He's at Sea Island, Georgia. But we're with our great friend Jody Vasquez. And all of you love to listen to Jody. We're going to come up with a creative way, even though Jody didn't go to the Masters with Mr. Hogan. He's going to imagine if he was and talk about Ben Hogan, how he would prepare. Now, he won 9 majors, but if you sat down and you knew Hogan, he would say he won 10 because he won the Hail America in 1942, didn't he, Jody? And that was the substitute for the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting focuses when you talk about how many U.S. Opens that he won, he would always tell people privately, not publicly, but privately, that he had 5. And he said that directly to Faldo when I introduced Faldo to him. And, that really funny line about how do you win the U.S. Open? And Hogan said, you shoot the lowest score. And he in turn said, I know that's true because I've got 5 of them. Ron Syrek, who is a great writer and great historian, went back through the process of identifying what Hogan could have done. And part of that is the recognition of the field that he was playing against and the process of how they ran the tournament. And it was, in fact, the U.S. Open. They just didn't call it that.
Before we go into the Masters, which is going to be the subject for our episode today, I think you have a story to tell. He only went over, correct me if I'm wrong, did he only go over to play in the Open Championship that one time at Carnoustie?
Yeah, he went over there with some prodding of some people that he was very close to. And, they went over on a boat. Well, he had to qualify to get in the field, believe it or not. And I sat down with Mrs. Hogan, Valerie, and we discussed, and she explained to me that whole process that they went through and traveling and everything. It's a really interesting story as to how they dealt with not only the conditions that were over there, but the travel and everything associated with just going to play in the event, and how revered he was, by everybody that was on property in Carnoustie itself. So pretty interesting story in and of itself.
I think you mentioned that the people were so in love with Hogan, there was rationing back then of protein or beef or those kind of food products, and they rustled up enough ration tickets each night so he could have a steak.
Yeah, that's it was so funny. The way Valerie explained it to me, the staff all donated their protein rationing cards so that he could eat steak every night. And the first night the steak he ate, she said, was a small steak, probably a 6-ounce or 4-ounce steak. And Hogan's comment back to her was, because he didn't know any of this, and his comment back to her is, Valerie, I can't play and just eat this amount of food. And she said, Ben, these people gave you their rationing tickets. And he said, okay, I can do this then. She kind of chastised him as she was telling me the story. Now there may be another side to the story because he might tell that story differently. I never asked him about that part, but she was pretty straightforward in explaining what it was when they were over there.
Nicholas and Hogan overlapped, and this was their office. The Masters was their office. Nicholas won 6 times, 86 the most recent time, which we all remember. And we'll go through some of the things on the back 9 of the Augusta in your eyes through Hogan. But he finished 16 other times in the top 10. Hogan won the Masters two times, but he finished 15 times in the top 10. 15 times. So this was his, had to be one of his favorite venues to go to.
Yeah, I think the those kinds of records really do matter. That kind of performance is important. And so I think that if you really look at the whole context of what they competed against and how they played, it's very comparable in that era to greatness. I know that Ron Syrek said one time that if Hogan had not been in the car wreck, exponentially, he could have ended up with as many as 20 to 25 majors. So it's pretty interesting that he would have been able to do that, uh, and take on that kind of of a of an event and then perform at that level. Uh,
And Nicholas was blessed with two things: relatively injury free during his 2 or 3 decades of playing top level golf from the 50s to 86. That's 4 decades. But he also had a beautiful wife that took care of everything else, and he had a big family. So let's go into the Masters here. We're now in the back nine, and Hogan's in the hunt with three other players. Let's just say he's either in the lead at 7 or 8 under, and he's now going to the back nine, or the second nine, as they call it today. I don't know what's the difference, but the second nine, that 10th hole. Take us through. We all know these holes so well. Take us through how Hogan would plot his strategy around, because you know a bit about that in knowing him and talking to others about his strategy.
well, I think the first thing you'd want to know and understand about how he approached any tournament he played in. Obviously, the majors are the more important, but his mindset was that he prepared his ball striking when he was in Fort Worth at Shady Oaks. But in terms of being on property and playing, then he just focused on how he would play the golf course. He shared this with Faldo when they met. I was pretty surprised that he actually said this to him, but he said that when he was practicing, he said he never went to the golf course on the tournament rounds and hadn't hit a shot into a green or played a hole that he hadn't already hit on the practice range.
So Jody and Billy, we're looking at Ben Hogan, Mr. Hogan, typical day hitting the balls. I think this might be at a major championship site, Augusta. And look at to the left is Ken Venturi. He couldn't be 4 feet from him. He's trying to get some free pointers here. And the announcer is saying, you don't worry about seeing this swing or next swing. It's not that important, because as you'll see as they turn up the volume, everyone looked the same.
So what he was really saying is that on the first tee, during the time he was hitting his driver, he would act like he's hitting the tee shot on the first hole, and then the tee shot on the second hole and the third hole. And then when he's hitting his 8-iron, he knew the irons he was going to hit. And so he would say, okay, this shot, this ball I'm going to hit is to the left front pin on number 6 or whatever.
Moving to the 10th hole, he would hit either 3-wood or driver with a draw, get the carom down there into what, the 6 or 7-iron, and that's what he was preparing to hit into the 10th green.
Exactly. That's what he prepared himself to do. When he was on the practice range, he wasn't just hitting golf balls to correct, something he didn't feel comfortable with in his practice or his swing. I mean, he did that, admittedly in Fort Worth, and we all know that he went to Seminole a couple of weeks before the Augusta and prepared there as well. So he was well on his way when he went to a tournament, particularly the majors today. I think one of the funny conversations he had with Faldo again, because it shows so much about his personality. Faldo said, which were the tournaments you played in that were the most important to you? And he said, everyone that wrote a check. Because they needed the money. So the check was really more important than the event they were playing in. So
Different topic today. I heard somebody say, or he said, if I hit it left of the pin on 11, I pulled it.
I've heard him say that. There's two places you don't go. He said he never aimed at the green on 11. And then I can remember we had just finished shagging balls, and he was sitting there with us in the golf shop at Shady Oaks when DiVincenzo was hitting his second shot into number 18 at Augusta. And he was watching the TV. We had an old black and white TV sitting on the end of the counter. And he and Art Hall and I were standing there. And DiVincenzo hits the shot. And obviously he pulled it left of the green. And Hogan just looked at it and just shook his head and didn't say a word and turned and walked back into the locker room. Before DiVincenzo hit that shot, Hogan said, this ball's got to be short right of the green. He can't go left. And then, of course, DiVincenzo pulls it left. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the TV for a second, and then he just turned around and walked out. He was going like, okay, well, he ought to lose.
How would you imagine he would play the 13th hole? Now,
well, I think what you have to really look at back in the era when they were playing Persimmon and Bellata is the conditions that they were playing under. They're certainly not as firm and fast today or then as they are today. But I think if you look at if he always considered pin locations and angles, so he was always placing the ball where he could be aggressive and from a trajectory standpoint. He believed in trajectory above all when he was playing into greens. So I would think if you followed him around the golf course, you would see him look more to, okay, what angle am I coming in at? And once I see that angle, when I get to that position, what's the trajectory that I'm going to use to attack the pin? There's a saying I always write in my book. I'm going to plug my book, Afternoons with Mr. Hogan.
absolutely.
But there's when I sign the book for people, I always put on the bottom of the book, "Think birdies." And the reason I say that is directly from him. When he was on the tee, his focus was to position each shot so he could make a birdie. So his thought process was shot by shot for sure, but his real accomplishing thought was to make sure that he had an opportunity to make a birdie. Again, I'm going to plug my book. If you look at the book, in chapter 13, there are a lot of theories of how to play the golf course and how you play full shots to front pins, 3/4 shots to back pins, things like that. He really lived those theories. And so he would take the approach of, let's look at the position of the pin and then let's just attack it based on the angles. 13, the problem that we've got today is not only have those holes been changed, but the conditions are far different. I mean, if you go to Augusta and play that golf course outside of outside of April when they're playing the tournament, you'll know that the surfaces are soft and the ball doesn't nearly go as far. And so you'd have to assume back then that the conditions were such that you didn't get the 20 yards a roll. And so therefore your options were limited. You and I both know that back then the surface was common Bermuda. And so with common Bermuda, you're going to get some really, really tough lies when you're looking at something like a 4-iron to a 4-wood type shot. You don't get zoysia grass lies back on a common Bermuda surface.
Into the green in Bermuda fairways, would he rather hit a 4-iron or a 4-wood?
Oh, I think 4-wood. I've heard him say this, and I think it's really interesting. We all know that 12 or is the par three that gives everybody the most angst.
Yes.
Okay, I've heard him tell people that when he's standing over the ball before he hits it, in his waggle, whatever his prep is, he's standing there and he doesn't make the swing until he felt the breeze on his cheek. Because when he felt the breeze on his cheek, he said he knew that he needed to hit the ball right after he felt it, because there wasn't going to be a gust of wind. It's not a consistent breeze that's coming into him. So he felt like when he hit the ball after the gust hit his cheek, he said he was comfortable the distance was going to be what he thought it would be, and the ball wouldn't
Wow.
be bothered by the wind.
Well, we've all heard Nicholas aims to the left over the middle of that bunker, but no one's ever told us that story. That's awesome.
He'd
Yeah.
stop and he'd wait until he felt the wind, and then he'd go ahead and swing. Now, as far as 16's concerned, again, he was such a good ball striker from the angle of trajectory. I mean, as I watched him practice, he changed trajectories all the time. He called them windows in the sky. Depending on how high he hit the ball, he knew that would affect the yardage the ball was actually going to travel. So he always worked on trajectory because he knew that equated to distance, and he could rely on that trajectory, that window in the sky, in order to be able to tell he's going to hit it 135 or 140, just depending on the trajectory that he's playing with. His concept about attacking a target was always, you looked at the problem. You looked at the water or the bunker, and then you aimed at it and then move the ball away from it. So if he saw a bunker to the left, he would know that, okay, I'm going to throw the ball at the bunker and I'm going to cut it to the right because I know it's going to cut, and then I'll not have to worry about the ball being in the bunker. So that was the concept that he used in order to say, okay, I'm going to keep the ball out of trouble, but I'm doing it. I'm not aiming away from the trouble. I'm aiming at the trouble and then moving the ball away from the trouble. Yeah. Now that's a lot easier to do today, or that's a lot harder to do today with the balls that we play.
Yeah.
The Balata ball was so much more receptive to curvature. So it was a lot easier to cut a ball 5 yards or 6 yards or 10 yards, whatever that happened to be, than it is with the balls that we have today.
As well as the irons the way they were made back then. So let's kind of sum up with this. I'm sure that Hogan might have had to have a towel to kind of burp into a little bit if he saw Scotty Scheffler's leg action and movement and all that. But if you took that away, what's so impressive, like right now, if you were betting on DraftKings and Scotty is in the tournament, you almost can't bet someone other than him in first place. It's like, you're throwing your money away. But outside of that, he does have the temperament. He does move the ball the way it's necessary to move it. He does it in a different way. His chipping and his bunker play, it's seldom around he's not chipping it in. What would Hogan say about Scotty Scheffler today? Assume he was using Ben Hogan clubs.
That would be the first thing. He wouldn't even look at it. It is so funny. I've got a lot of stories about this, but he didn't really care what players looked like or did. I tell people all the time, one of the things that he would always say to somebody is a guy that would go like, "Did you see that swing?" When he's playing with somebody, and he would go like, "No," and the guy would go like, "You didn't see him swing?" And he'd go like, "No, I have my own set of problems." he never watched. Whenever I watched him watch somebody swing, you're right, he always looked down, waist down. He didn't really care what was happening up here. And I'll give you an example of that. Again, at Shady Oaks, he had just come back from practicing, and there was a member, guy named Lacey Bogus, who was an accountant there, was standing in front of that little TV I'm talking about, and Trevino was getting ready to hit a shot. It was down in the Houston Open. And so Lacey said, "Hey, Ben, stop and look at this guy." And of course, Trevino makes his outside in, swing and all that. And Lacey goes, "What do you think of that swing?" Thinking Hogan was going to say, "That's the worst swing I've ever seen." Hogan looked at him and he goes, like, "I really do like that swing." And then he turned and walked into the locker room, and Lacey was just staring at him as he was walking out, going like, "What? You like that swing?" Because he always looked at the guy's leg work. And so he didn't care what you did up here. Watch all the video you want of Lee. You can be around Lee right now, and his ball coming off that face is so solid. I mean, it's the ball sounds really, really good, and you're going like, "Wait a second, Lee, you're 84 years old. How in the hell are you doing this?"
All right.
So,
The time you told us the story, come on. You were hitting it left, you're aiming left, and you double cross yourself. Tell us, you don't have to say exactly what Trevino said, but give us some wisdom for guys like me, 15 handicap golfers that want to aim it down the left side, and then it's the double cross.
oh well, I don't think Lee got mad at me for telling a guy this one time, and he did it in the context of let those guys figure it out on their own. I don't think he cares anymore because he's not playing. But Lee always said that in order for him to keep from moving the ball anywhere left, that he would take his left wrist, and just before he takes the club back, he would arc it. And so when you arc it like that, what you end up doing is lifting your arm away, and when you come down, it holds that position, and the ball won't go left. I mean, you can go out on the range this afternoon and you can set your hands on the club, and just before you get ready to take the club away, arc your wrist at address this way. In other words, pushing the wrist down and then take it away. You'll be shocked at how easy it is to hold that position. But yeah,
Anatomically, he knew how to prevent the flip.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's impressive that when he went on the senior tour, what was that? Probably early 90s. Uh, he was able to take that same motion and reconstruct it and start hitting the ball left and turning it over. So, I mean, Lee's an incredibly talented player. Hogan knew that. Hogan really, really liked Lee. And he would come in and have Gene Sheely build a set of clubs. And he would literally say to Sheely, "Hey, send these over to that Mexican kid in Dallas. Let him hit these. And then let him tell me what they were like." Now, he didn't say Mexican kid meaning derogatory. That was just, the way he talked.
Yeah.
So, but no, he would send equipment over to Lee and then ask Lee to give him some feedback on the equipment. He didn't do that with everybody. Trust
Did he
me.
get feedback?
Oh yeah, Lee'd get back to him. Yeah, they would make adjustments and stuff like that. Uh, I remember one time we used to drill holes in the back of wedges, and you'd put tungsten in different positions. So you'd put them on the heel or the middle or the toe. And we built 3 wedges and took them over to Lee when he was playing in the Dallas tournament, senior tournament. And they were unmarked. And of course, they were chrome, so you couldn't tell where they were. Of course, we knew where they were. But Nick Raffel asked Lee if he had hit them. And Lee instantly hit the ball, and he'd go like, "There's weight on the heel on this one. There's weight in the middle on this one. This one's so heavy." And he didn't know what was there, but he was telling Nick and me. He said, "This is what I feel with the ball coming off." So Lee's always been incredibly talented. Just a lot of talent in that body.
So we're Hogan here today, and has one more trip to Augusta, and he had one thing that he could do, one place, one thing, whatever, what would you think it'd be the one thing he would do at Augusta and make sure he did while he was there next week during the Masters, if he was there for a day?
Well, that's a tough one. Let me answer it this way. One time, I saw an interview where Snead got asked, "What if Hogan came to the Tuesday night champions dinner?" And Snead said it would be like the return of Jesus Christ. So there's enormous respect for him because he never really traveled. His lifestyle was really composed socially of just his close friends. So he never really went anywhere. I think there was a deal by a guy in Japan that he was going to build 18 greens or 18 holes, but he was going to have like Byron Nelson design one, Snead design one, each of the players in that era, Sarazen and all that. But he wanted all those guys to fly to Japan and then have a photo shoot of all of them there. Everybody agreed because he was going to pay everybody to do that. When he got to Hogan, Hogan goes like, "No, I'm not going anywhere." So they all came to Shady Oaks and took the photo shoot. He was the only one that was going like, "No, I don't have a price. I'm not interested and I'm not going." So
this is great. So he would think about the champions dinner and showing up there. That would be unbelievable.
well, I can say that because I know there was a spell of probably, I'd say 10 or 11, 12 years where he didn't even attend the champions dinner Wednesday night at Colonial.
Oh,
And then one year he decided, yes, he would come. And his entrance into it was just everybody knew, and it's a small crowd because it's the champions, the guys that are invited, that are champions choices, which normally would be two people, and then the tournament committee. So it's a very, very small crowd. But I'm standing here talking to you, and I'm looking over my shoulder at the door, just trying. I'm not hearing a word you're saying. I'm trying to figure out, okay, when is Hogan going to come in the door? And so that was the way that's the way he was received. Probably would be a similar activity, yeah, at the Masters this week too.
it's hard to imagine Hogan because some of us didn't know him. You knew him for 30 plus years. You had a special relationship with him, a different relationship with him. And he didn't have millions of relationships like an Arnold Palmer, like you said. And you were one of his friends. This is so wonderful that you share your thoughts in this kind of made up example of what it would be like at Hogan at the Masters today and what we think of it and how we prepared. We thank you so much, and hopefully we'll come up with another inventive idea in the future. Pick your brain. But if you haven't gotten Jody's book, Afternoons with Mr. Hogan, it's one of the greatest golf books and reads, especially if you like Ben Hogan.
Well, I'll say it again, and I say it all the time. The reason I wrote it is I wanted people to understand who he was and not just the record that was there. It's like Ron Syrek said to me years ago, if you want to know anything about Palmer or Nicklaus, any player, you just pull in a tape of ESPN and you know everything you need to know. Well, Hogan was pre-ESPN, so you don't know him, wouldn't know him unless guys like myself would introduce you to him through stories that we have. But thank you. I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully stay safe, and we'll do it again.
Birdies, 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 birdies.
Always thank Birdie.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add at the end. That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My
you.
brother was making me laugh.